I thought I knew the man I'd called a friend for years, but some nights unravel secrets you never dared to imagine. At 59, I'd locked my heart away, safe from whispers of desire, until Michael's voice, low and laced with mystery, drew me into a game I didn't know we were playing. "Meet me tonight," he murmured, his gaze a shadowed promise I couldn't resist. In a dimly lit pizzeria, where the air thrummed with unspoken truths, I felt the first stirrings of something dangerous. At 59, I, Eleanor Grayson, had woven a life of careful solitude. Decades as a librarian, evenings spent with the ghosts of novels and the comfort of chamomile tea, and a heart that had long since silenced its yearning. But that night, Michael Harper had extended an invitation that felt more like a dare, and I couldn't turn away. Michael was 62, a retired architect who'd spent the last 5 years haunting the library where I worked, his presence as familiar as the books on the shelves. We'd shared countless conversations about old maps, classic literature, the way the light fell through the library windows at dusk. But there was always a distance between us, a line I'd never thought to cross. He had a way of looking at me, his blue eyes sharp with something unspoken that made me wonder what lay beneath his quiet charm. That morning, his voice had been different, a low murmur that sent a shiver down my spine. "Eleanor," he'd said, his tone a velvet caress, "meet me tonight. Just the two of us. I know a place where the world can't find us." I'd hesitated, my mind a tangle of caution, but my body had already decided, drawn to the mystery in his words. La Dolce Vita was a hidden pizzeria on a cobblestone street, its windows glowing with a secretive light that beckoned me inside. The scent of fresh basil and simmering tomatoes wrapped around me as I stepped through the door, a seductive promise that quickened my pulse. Michael was already there, seated at a shadowed table in the corner, a single candle casting a flickering glow across his face. He stood as I approached, his navy sweater clinging to his broad shoulders, his silver hair catching the light in a way that made him look both familiar and dangerously unknown. "Eleanor," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through me. "You look like a secret waiting to be told." His words were a spark, igniting a heat I hadn't felt in years, and I felt my cheeks flush as I sat across from him. I'd chosen a navy dress that hugged my curves, a choice I hadn't questioned until now, and a delicate necklace that rested against my collarbone, a quiet reminder of the woman I used to be. "Thank you," I murmured, my voice betraying the tremor of my nerves. The table was small, the space between us charged with an unspoken tension, the candle's flame a silent witness to the game we were beginning to play. We ordered a bottle of red wine, its deep crimson hue a mirror to the secrets I sensed lurking beneath Michael's calm exterior. And as the waiter poured, he leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving mine. "I've been thinking about this all day," he said, his voice a low purr that sent a shiver through me. "A night where we can leave the library behind, where we can be more than what we've been." I took a sip of wine, the taste of blackberry and oak, a sharp contrast to the heat in my chest. "More?" I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper, the word a question I wasn't sure I wanted answered. There was a darkness in his eyes, a hint of something I couldn't name, and it made my pulse race with a mix of fear and desire. I'd known Michael for years, but tonight he was a stranger who knew me better than I knew myself. The waiter returned with a menu, and Michael's lips curled into a half smile, a glint of mischief in his gaze. "They have a special tonight," he said, his tone suggestive, as if the words held a double meaning. A pizza with truffle oil and prosciutto. Something decadent. Shall we indulge? His question was a challenge, and I felt a thrill run through me, a dangerous excitement I couldn't resist. Let's, I said, my voice bolder than I felt, and the word felt like a step into the unknown. I wanted to unravel the mystery of Michael, to discover the man behind the friend I thought I knew, and I was willing to play this game to find out. The pizza arrived, a golden circle of temptation, the truffle oil shimmering like a secret under the dim lights. Michael inhaled deeply, his eyes closing for a moment, as if savoring more than just the scent. "It's perfect," he said, his gaze locking onto mine, "for two people who have something to share." His words were a riddle, and as our hands brushed, reaching for the same slice, I felt a jolt, a spark that promised more than I'd ever dared to imagine. "Eleanor," he whispered, his voice a velvet blade, "I have a secret to tell you." His words hung in the air, a promise of revelation, and I knew this night was about to take a turn I'd never forget. The candle's flame flickered between us, a restless spirit casting shadows that danced across Michael's face, accentuating the sharp lines of his jaw and the enigmatic glint in his blue eyes. His words, "I have a secret to tell you," hung in the air like a forbidden melody, each note tightening the coil of anticipation in my chest. I set my wineglass down, the deep red liquid catching the light like a pool of hidden truths, and leaned forward, drawn to the mystery he dangled before me. La dolce vita seemed to fade into a haze, the clink of glasses and murmur of voices a distant echo, leaving only the two of us in a world of whispered possibilities. Michael's gaze held mine, a predator's focus, cloaked in the guise of a friend, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. Not of fear, but of something darker, something that tasted like desire. "What kind of secret?" I asked, my voice a hushed challenge, the words trembling with a curiosity I couldn't suppress. At 59, I'd thought my days of chasing secrets were long behind me, but with Michael, I was a moth drawn to a flame I didn't yet understand. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear, as he whispered, "I've wanted you for longer than I should admit." The confession was a velvet blade, slicing through the careful walls I'd built around my heart, and I felt my breath catch, my body betraying me with a flush of heat that spread from my cheeks to my core. His words were a forbidden dance, each syllable a step closer to a line we'd never crossed, and I found myself leaning into the danger, craving more. "Michael," I breathed, my voice a mix of shock and something I didn't want to name. "You can't just say things like that." But even as I spoke, I felt the lie in my words. I wanted him to say more, to unravel the enigma he'd become in the span of a single evening. I'd known him for years, seen him as a steady presence in the library, a man of quiet charm and gentle smiles. But tonight, he was a stranger with a secret that threatened to consume me. He pulled back slightly, his lips curling into a half-smile that was both tender and dangerous, a predator playing at being prey. "I can," he said, his voice a low purr that sent a shiver through me. "Because it's true. I've watched you, Eleanor, watched the way you move through the world, so careful, so guarded, but I see the fire beneath, the woman you've hidden away, and I've wanted to be the one to set her free." His words were a spell, weaving a web of intrigue and desire that I couldn't escape, and I felt my heart race, a wild thing caught in a trap of its own making. I reached for a slice of pizza, the act a desperate attempt to ground myself, but the flavors of truffle oil and prosciutto only heightened my senses, each bite a reminder of the decadence of the moment. Michael watched me, his gaze a caress, and I felt exposed, as if he could see every hidden thought, every buried longing. I don't know what to say, I admitted, my voice trembling as I set the slice down, my fingers lingering on the edge of the plate. You've always been safe, a friend, but this, I gestured between us, the air thick with unspoken tension. This feels like something else. It is, he said, his voice a quiet command, his hand reaching across the table to brush against mine. The touch, a spark that ignited a fire I couldn't control. It's something more, Eleanor. Something we've both been running from. But I'm tired of running. Aren't you? The question was a challenge, a dare wrapped in velvet, and I felt my resolve waver, the walls I'd built around my heart crumbling under the weight of his gaze. I thought of the years I'd spent alone, the nights I'd whispered to the shadows of my past, the way I'd convinced myself that desire was a flame I'd never feel again. But Michael's words, his touch, his very presence, they were a match, and I was the kindling, ready to burn. I whispered, the confession slipping out before I could stop it, and I saw a flicker of triumph in his eyes, a predator who'd caught his prey. But there was something else there too, vulnerability, a raw honesty that made my chest ache. But I'm scared, Michael, scared of what this means, of what we might become. He squeezed my hand, his thumb tracing circles against my skin, a gesture that was both comforting and suggestive, a promise of things to come. I'm scared too, he admitted, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through me. But I'd rather face that fear with you than spend another day pretending I don't feel this. Tell me you feel it too. The air between us crackled, a storm brewing in the space where our hands met, and I knew I couldn't lie, not to him, not to myself. I do, I said, my voice a trembling vow, and as the words left my lips, I felt the night shift, a door opening to a world I'd never dared to imagine. What secrets did Michael still hold, and what would happen when they were finally revealed? The confession lingered between us, a charged current that made the air in La Dolce Vita feel heavy with unspoken promises. I do, I'd said, admitting the pull I felt toward Michael, and the words seemed to unlock something in him, a flicker of triumph, yes, but also a shadow of something deeper, something I couldn't quite name. His thumb continued its slow, deliberate dance across my knuckles, each movement a silent seduction, and I felt my breath hitch, caught in the web of his gaze. The candlelight cast his face in a play of light and shadow, making him look like a man who held secrets I wasn't sure I was ready to uncover. Michael leaned back in his chair, his hand still holding mine, but his expression shifted, a mask of calm settling over the intensity I'd glimpsed moments before. I'm glad you said that, he murmured, his voice a velvet caress that sent a shiver down my spine. Because I've been keeping more from you, Eleanor. Things I've wanted to say, to do, for far too long. His words were a riddle, each one laced with a suggestive undertone that made my pulse race, and I felt a thrill of danger, a whisper of the unknown that both terrified and exhilarated me. What things? I asked, my voice a hushed challenge, though I wasn't sure I was ready for the answer. At 59, I'd thought my days of chasing mysteries were over, but Michael was a puzzle I couldn't resist. A man who'd hidden his true desires behind the facade of friendship for years. The pizza sat forgotten between us, its golden crust a silent witness to the shift in our dance. And I felt the weight of his gaze, heavy with secrets yet to be revealed. He smiled, a slow, predatory smile that made my heart stutter, and leaned forward again, his voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to wrap around me like a shadow. "Things I've imagined in the quiet moments," he said, his words a forbidden melody. "The way your laughter might sound in a place far from here, the way your hand might feel in mine under a different sky. I've dreamed of you, Eleanor, in ways I never dared to admit, until now." His confession was a flame, licking at the edges of my carefully guarded heart, and I felt a flush of heat spread through me, a mix of desire and unease. I'd known Michael as a friend, a steady presence in the library, but this version of him, this man who spoke of dreams and hidden desires, was a stranger, one who made me question everything I thought I knew. "You've dreamed of me?" I echoed, my voice trembling with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "For how long?" "Longer than I should have," he admitted, his gaze never leaving mine, and I saw a flicker of something raw in his eyes. Vulnerability, perhaps, or a fear that mirrored my own. "Since the first day I saw you, standing in the library with a book in your hands, the sunlight catching your hair like a halo. I knew then that you were more than a colleague, more than a friend. But I kept my distance, afraid of what it might mean to want you." His words were a revelation, a secret unveiled in the dim light of the pizzeria, and I felt a pang of something I couldn't name. Longing, yes, but also a quiet fear of the unknown. I'd spent so long hiding from my own desires, convincing myself that love was a chapter I'd closed, that I wasn't sure how to step into this new story he was writing. "Michael," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, This is a lot. I don't know if I'm ready for what you're offering." He nodded, his expression softening, but the intensity in his gaze remained, a promise of things yet to come. "I know," he said, his thumb brushing against my wrist, a touch that sent a jolt through me. "And I don't want to push you, Eleanor, but I couldn't keep pretending. Not tonight. Not when I feel this pull between us. Tell me you don't feel it too." I wanted to deny it, to retreat to the safety of the life I'd known. But the truth was a weight I couldn't ignore. I did feel it, the electric current that ran between us, the way his touch set my skin alight, the way his words stirred a longing I'd buried deep. "I do," I admitted, my voice a trembling vow, and I saw a spark of triumph in his eyes, a predator who'd caught his prey. But before I could say more, I caught a glimpse of movement in the corner of my eye, a figure at the edge of the pizzeria, watching us from the shadows. My heart skipped a beat as I turned, my gaze locking onto a pair of familiar eyes. Clara, my late husband's sister, her expression a storm of disapproval. She'd seen us, seen the way Michael's hand held mine, the way our bodies leaned toward each other, and I felt a chill run through me, a premonition of the storm to come. "Michael," I whispered, my voice tight with sudden fear, "we're being watched." His head turned, following my gaze, and I saw his jaw tighten, a flicker of something dark passing over his features. The night had just taken a turn I hadn't expected, and I knew that whatever secrets Michael still held, they were about to be tested. The air in La Dolce Vita thickened with a sudden chill as Clara's gaze bore into us from the shadows, her presence a storm cloud threatening to unravel the fragile web of desire Michael and I had spun. I felt my breath catch, the weight of her disapproval a tangible force, and I pulled my hand from Michael's. The absence of his touch, a sharp ache that mirrored the unease in my chest. At 59, I'd thought I'd left the ghosts of my past behind, but Clara, Thomas's sister, a keeper of his memory, stood as a reminder of the life I'd once lived, a life I'd thought I'd never betray. Michael followed my gaze, his jaw tightening as he spotted Clara, and I saw a flicker of something dark pass over his features, anger, perhaps, or a protective instinct I hadn't seen before. "Who is she?" he asked, his voice a low growl, the warmth of moments ago, replaced by a steely edge that sent a shiver through me. There was a danger in him now, a side I hadn't glimpsed until this moment, and it made me wonder just how much of Michael I truly knew. "Clara," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and guilt. "My late husband's sister. She doesn't approve of me moving on." The words felt like a confession, a secret I hadn't meant to share, but Michael's presence had a way of drawing truths from me, each one a thread in the tapestry of intrigue we were weaving. Clara stepped forward, her auburn hair catching the dim light, her eyes sharp with accusation. "Eleanor," she said, her voice a blade wrapped in silk, "I didn't expect to find you here, playing at something you shouldn't." Her gaze flicked to Michael, her lips curling into a sneer that made my stomach twist. "And with a man who looks like he's hiding more than he's telling." Michael's hand clenched into a fist on the table, but his voice remained calm, a velvet mask over the storm I sensed brewing beneath. "I don't believe we've met," he said, his tone deceptively smooth. "But I assure you, I'm not hiding anything that concerns you." His words were a challenge, a dare wrapped in civility, and I felt the air between them crackle with unspoken tension. Clara's eyes narrowed, her gaze shifting back to me, and I saw a flicker of something dangerous in her expression. Jealousy, perhaps, or a deeper resentment I hadn't anticipated. "You think you can just erase Thomas?" she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "He loved you, Eleanor, and you're throwing that away for this?" She gestured to Michael, her disdain palpable, and I felt a pang of guilt, sharp and searing, as if her words had struck a hidden wound. "I'm not erasing him," I said, my voice trembling but firm, a defiance I hadn't known I possessed rising to the surface. "Thomas will always be a part of me, but I'm allowed to live, Clara. I'm allowed to feel again." The words were a declaration, a line drawn in the sand, and I felt Michael's hand brush against mine under the table, a silent show of support that steadied me. Clara's expression darkened, her lips pressing into a thin line, and for a moment I thought she might lash out, her anger a storm ready to break. But then she took a step back, her gaze flickering between us, and I saw a shadow of doubt in her eyes. "Be careful, Eleanor," she said, her voice a low warning that sent a chill down my spine. "Some men have secrets that can break you." She turned and disappeared into the night, her words lingering like a curse, a premonition of the danger I sensed lurking beneath Michael's enigmatic charm. I turned to him, my heart racing, the warmth of our earlier connection now tinged with a quiet fear. "What did she mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, the question a plea for reassurance. "What secrets, Michael?" He exhaled slowly, his hand tightening around mine, his touch a tether in the storm of my thoughts. "She doesn't know me," he said, his voice low and steady. but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Guilt, perhaps, or a truth he wasn't ready to share. But I won't lie to you, Eleanor. There are things I haven't told you, things about my past, about why I've kept my distance for so long. But they're not what you think. His words were a riddle, a promise wrapped in mystery, and I felt a surge of frustration, a need to unravel the enigma he'd become. Then tell me, I said, my voice a quiet demand, my gaze searching his for the truth. If we're going to do this, if we're going to be more, I need to know who you are, Michael. All of you. He nodded, his expression softening, but the shadow in his eyes remained, a hint of the secrets he still held. I will, he said, his voice a vow that felt both comforting and ominous. But not here. Let's go somewhere quieter, somewhere we can talk, really talk. He stood, offering me his hand, and I took it, my heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and dread. The night was far from over, and I had a feeling the secrets Michael held would change everything. The cobblestone street stretched before us, like a path to the unknown, the city lights casting long shadows that seemed to whisper secrets as Michael and I left La Dolce Vita behind. Clara's warning, "Some men have secrets that can break you," echoed in my mind. A haunting refrain that clashed with the warmth of Michael's hand in mine, his touch a tether in the storm of my thoughts. At 59, I'd thought I'd mastered the art of guarding my heart, but with Michael, I was a moth drawn to a flame, and I couldn't tell if it would illuminate my world or burn it to ash. We walked in silence, the tension between us a living thing, a coiled spring ready to snap. Michael's pace was deliberate, his grip on my hand firm but not forceful, and I sensed a battle within him, a struggle between the man I'd known and the one he'd hidden away. The city around us was a canvas of amber and shadow, the air cool with the promise of rain, and I felt a shiver run through me, a mix of the night's chill and the unease Clara's words had stirred. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice a hushed demand, the question a lifeline in the sea of uncertainty. I needed to know, not just where he was taking me, but who he truly was, what secrets he held that could cast such a shadow over the desire I felt for him. Michael glanced at me, his blue eyes catching the light in a way that made them look almost otherworldly, a storm of emotion swirling in their depths. "There's a park nearby," he said, his voice low and measured, a velvet mask over the tension I sensed beneath. "It's quiet, private. We can talk there, away from prying eyes." His words were a promise, but they carried a suggestive undertone, a hint of something more intimate, and I felt my pulse quicken, a mix of anticipation and dread. The park was a small oasis of green, its trees heavy with autumn leaves in shades of crimson and gold, their branches swaying in the breeze like whispered secrets. The path wound through the park, illuminated by the soft glow of street lamps, and Michael led me to a secluded bench overlooking a pond, its surface a mirror reflecting the stars above. We sat, the wood cool beneath us, and I turned to him, my heart pounding with a need for answers. His words were a riddle, and I felt a surge of frustration, a need to unravel the enigma he'd become. "Afraid of what?" I pressed, my voice trembling with a mix of impatience and longing. "Michael, if we're going to do this, if we're going to be more, I need to know who you are, all of you." He nodded, his expression darkening, and I saw a flicker of something raw in his eyes. Guilt, perhaps, or a pain he'd kept hidden. "I was married before," he said finally, his voice a quiet confession. "Her name was Margaret. She passed 10 years ago." Cancer. But that's not the secret. He paused, his hand tightening around mine, and I felt a chill run through me, a premonition of the truth to come. His confession was a thunderclap, a revelation that shook the foundation of the night, and I felt a wave of shock wash over me, followed by a quiet fear. Debts? I echoed, my voice trembling. What kind of debts, Michael? Are you in danger? The stars above the park seemed to dim as Michael's confession settled over us, a heavy fog that blurred the edges of the night. There are still ties, still debts I owe, he'd said, his words a dark thread weaving through the tapestry of desire and mystery that had drawn me to him. I sat on the bench, my hand still in his, the cool wood beneath me a stark contrast to the heat of his touch, and I felt a storm brewing within me, a clash of fear and longing, a battle between the woman I'd been and the one I wanted to become. At 59, I'd thought I'd left danger behind, but Michael's past was a shadow that threatened to engulf us both. I pulled my hand from his, the sudden absence of his touch a sharp ache that mirrored the unease in my chest. What kind of debts, Michael? I asked, my voice a trembling demand, the question a lifeline in the sea of uncertainty. What did you do? And why didn't you tell me sooner? The words were a plea, a need to understand the man who'd ignited a fire in me, a man who now stood on the edge of a darkness I hadn't anticipated. Michael's gaze dropped to the ground, his silver hair catching the faint light of the street lamps, and I saw a flicker of shame in his expression, a vulnerability that made my heart ache, even as it fueled my fear. I didn't tell you because I was afraid, he admitted, his voice a low rumble that seemed to echo the distant thunder I sensed in the air. Afraid you'd look at me the way you're looking at me now, like I'm a stranger, a man you can't trust. His words were a knife, cutting through the haze of desire that had clouded my judgment, and I felt a pang of guilt, a realization that my fear was a barrier between us. I don't know what to think, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of frustration and longing. You've been a part of my life for years, Michael. I thought I knew you, but this changes everything. He looked up at me, his blue eyes sharp with a desperate intensity, and I saw a storm of emotions swirling in their depths. Regret, yes, but also a fierce determination that made my pulse race. I know, he said, his voice a quiet vow, and I'll tell you everything, Eleanor. I owe you that, but I need you to understand. I'm not that man anymore. I've spent years trying to make things right, to leave that life behind. I thought I had, until tonight. Until tonight? I echoed, my heart lurching in my chest, a premonition of danger tightening its grip. What do you mean? Is someone looking for you? The question was a whisper, a fear I hadn't dared to voice until now, and I felt a chill run through me, a mix of the night's cool air and the dread that Clara's warning had stirred. Michael hesitated, his hand reaching for mine again, but I pulled back, the space between us a chasm I wasn't sure I could cross. I don't know, he admitted, his voice a low growl, the words heavy with a truth he couldn't hide. I've been careful, but there are people from that time who might still be watching. I saw someone earlier, outside the pizzeria, before Clara showed up. A man I thought I recognized. I can't be sure, but it made me realize I can't keep you in the dark any longer. His confession was a thunderclap, a revelation that shook the fragile hope I'd clung to, and I felt a wave of fear wash over me, followed by a quiet anger. You saw someone, I said, my voice rising, a mix of panic and betrayal. And you didn't tell me? Michael, if we're in danger, I need to know. I can't do this if you're keeping secrets that could hurt us. He reached for me again, his hand hovering in the air between us, a silent plea for understanding. I didn't want to scare you, he said, his voice a desperate whisper, his eyes searching mine for forgiveness. I thought I could handle it, that I could keep you safe. But you're right. I should have told you. I'm telling you now because I don't want to lose you, Eleanor. I can't lose you. I don't want to lose you either, I admitted, my voice a trembling vow, and I saw a flicker of relief in his eyes, a spark of hope that mirrored my own. But we can't do this if there are still secrets between us. Promise me, no more shadows, Michael, no more hidden truths. He nodded, his hand finally finding mine, his touch a promise that sent a shiver through me. I promise, he said, his voice a low rumble, a vow that felt both comforting and ominous. No more shadows. But as he spoke, I caught a glimpse of movement in the distance, a figure in the shadows, watching us from the edge of the park, and I knew that the past wasn't done with us yet. The figure in the shadows vanished as quickly as it had appeared, a phantom swallowed by the night, but its presence lingered like a dark promise, a reminder of the secrets Michael had only begun to unveil. My heart pounded in my chest, a wild rhythm that matched the storm brewing in the air, the scent of rain now heavy as the clouds gathered above. I turned to Michael, his hand still gripping mine, his blue eyes sharp with a mix of fear and determination, and I felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on us. At 59, I'd thought I'd left danger behind, but the night had become a labyrinth of intrigue, and I wasn't sure if we'd find our way out. Michael, I whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of fear and urgency. Who was that? Was that the man you saw earlier? The question was a plea, a demand for the truth he'd promised, and I felt a surge of panic, a need to know if the shadows of his past were truly closing in. He followed my gaze to the empty edge of the park, his jaw tightening, and I saw a flicker of something dark in his expression. Anger, perhaps, or a fear that mirrored my own. I don't know, he admitted, his voice a low growl, the words heavy with a truth he couldn't hide. But I won't let anything happen to you, Eleanor. I swear it. His hand tightened around mine, his touch a tether in the storm, but I felt a chill run through me, a premonition of the danger that lurked just out of sight. We need to go, I said, my voice a quiet command, the instinct to flee overriding the desire that still simmered between us. If someone's watching us, if your past is catching up, we can't stay here. The words were a declaration, a line drawn in the sand. And I stood, pulling him with me, my heart racing with a mix of fear and resolve. Michael nodded, his expression darkening, but there was a fire in his eyes, a determination that made my pulse quicken. You're right, he said, his voice a low rumble, a promise wrapped in danger. But I need to tell you one more thing before we go any further. He stopped, turning to face me, his hands cupping my face with a tenderness that belied the storm around us, and I felt a jolt of anticipation, a need to know the final piece of the puzzle he'd become. What is it? I asked, my voice a trembling whisper, my gaze searching his for the truth. The park around us seemed to hold its breath, the leaves rustling in the breeze like whispered secrets, and I felt the weight of the moment, a crossroads that would define the path ahead. Michael's thumb brushed against my cheek, a gesture so intimate it made my breath catch, and his eyes locked onto mine. a storm of emotions swirling in their depths. "I love you, Eleanor," he said, his voice a quiet confession, a revelation that struck like lightning. "I've loved you for years from the shadows, from a distance, afraid to let myself feel it, but I can't hide it anymore. Not from you, not from myself. Whatever happens, whatever my past brings, I need you to know that." His words were a thunderclap, a declaration that shook the foundation of the night, and I felt a wave of shock wash over me, followed by a quiet joy that battled the fear in my heart. I'd spent so long guarding myself against love, convincing myself that it was a risk I couldn't take. But Michael's confession, his vulnerability, his desperate need to bare his soul, they were a mirror to my own longing, a reflection of the fire I'd felt in the pizzeria. "I love you too," I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them, a confession I hadn't realized I was ready to make. And as I spoke, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, a freedom I hadn't known I needed. The fear of his past, the shadow of danger, the uncertainty of what lay ahead. They were still there, but they were overshadowed by the truth of what we felt. A love that had been hidden in the shadows for too long. Michael's face lit up, a smile spreading across his features like the first light of dawn, and he pulled me into his arms, his lips finding mine in a kiss that was both desperate and tender, a promise of the future we could build. The rain began to fall, a soft drizzle that mingled with our kiss, and I felt the world fall away, leaving only the two of us, suspended in a moment that felt eternal. As we pulled apart, the rain now a steady patter, Michael took my hand, his touch a vow. "Let's go," he said, his voice a quiet command, a promise of protection. "We'll face whatever comes, together." And as we walked into the night, the city lights shimmering through the rain, I knew that this was only the beginning, a new chapter in a story of love and secrets, a dance with danger that we'd face as one.